So, welcome. Hi, good to see you. This is our second hybrid forum. And of course, the one webcam wasn't working, so we've switched it out, and I think we're good now. But glad to be with you. Thanks for joining. I will be running tech here, and Gus will do our introduction. But wherever you are, including here, maybe Gus, if you want to light that little chalice, that electric chalice there, and wherever you are at home, just take a breath of gratitude in your mind. Light the chalice that you have nearby or in your heart. There's a little switch on the bottom. It's in community we always light chalices, and we help each other. There we go. Thanks, Julie. Julie's lit thousands of those in the RE wing over the years. So in gratitude for community and being together, for those who are gathered here online and in person, we're grateful. So tonight we'll be doing Gus will offer a brief introduction, and then we'll be viewing the film Racially Charged by Brave New Films, and I'll talk about that. A little bit of music reflection time, and then time for comments and reflections as a group, and I'll be monitoring chat online as well. So with that, grateful to be here. And Gus, and this is the little camera where your Zoom people are. Yeah, thank you.
The author's mission is to champion social justice issues by using a model of media, education, and grassroots volunteer involvement that inspires, empowers, designed to engage and motivate and teach civic participation and motivate people to take action. Robert Greenwald and Brave New Films are about storytelling, educating people to take initiative to change. They are an activist company investing in projects that can affect lives by shouting the voices and stories of people nationwide who haven't been heard from because no one is paying attention. They motivate us to do more than what is in our narrow self-interest. They expose lies like Fox News and challenges mainstream media with the truth. From exposing the private prison crisis to helping middle class and poor workers to understand where your tax dollars are going, our groundbreaking social media campaigns have revolutionized activism. We are reaching millions through YouTube, bloggers, network sites, and strategic partnerships, and they're getting results. You are critical to advancing these hard-hitting campaigns, and we cannot create a socially conscious nation alone. Please consider donating today to help us create and distribute cutting-edge films that get results. All donations are tax-deductible. Brave New Films is a nonpartisan, nonprofit 501(c) organization that carries out the Brave New Films mission by creating and distributing educational films. Brave New Films Action Fund is a 501(c)(4) nonprofit organization that conducts legislative activities necessary to carry out the mission of the Brave New Films family. Neither of the Brave New Films organizations make contributions to or expressly advocates for election or defeat of candidates for public office. A $25 donation gives you access to over 1,000 of their excellent films on topics like justice, inequity, gun violence, security, corporate greed, and network lies, to name a few. So following the film, we'll hear the powerful song of Peter Mayer, then listen to your reflections of them. Thank you.
Biggest misconception about misdemeanors is that they are minor.
To start hearing more and more stories of voter suppression, that broke my heart.
They're the ones that are using the system. grandma was fighting for integration back in her day, and I'm fighting for the same thing now.
The problem is the system is working the way it's supposed to.
We're recording.
Sorry.
Sometimes I feel like my life ended that day.
My car died on the side of the road. A cop walked over to my car and asked me if I needed help, and I said no.
John Clark was convicted on a misdemeanor gambling charge and was forced to work on a chain gang.
I just remember being pushed, like being cornered into a wall.
I was just starting out life.
And I didn't think I had anything to hide.
Mary Gay was sentenced to 30 days, plus court costs for stealing a hat.
I was arrested that evening.
It was a misdemeanor. That was the beginning of the nightmare that I had to go through.
Henry Nelson was arrested for using abusive language in the presence of a female and was sent off to the coal mines.
He said, "You're going to jail." And I'm like, "What for?"
Misdemeanors have historically been the chump change crimes that we didn't pay attention to.
I've done nothing. I've done
Man, I just got beat up by the police last night. I could have lost my life.
13 million. That's about 80% of all American criminal dockets. 80% of what our criminal courts do is misdemeanors.
Got him in cuffs, look. I ain't doing nothing.
The story of misdemeanors is the story of law enforcement continuing to prioritize African Americans, Mexican immigrants, America's so-called criminal class.
You act like I really just committed a serious crime.
You did do something illegal. You crossed the crosswalk.
You might see 2 or 3 police standing here waiting for you.
The cops will jump out of the van anytime, anywhere.
That's what I was doing.
The misdemeanor system has not gotten its fair share of blame. Misdemeanors are the invidious first step in the racialization of crime in this country.
Too often, arrests for minor crimes devolve into police violence and death for Black and brown people.
They got me for jaywalking.
Not wearing a seatbelt. My tail light was out.
I was arrested for being home. Driving with a suspended license. My license got suspended because I didn't know I had an unsafe parking.
I was shocked, and that was for this big claim that I was in charge of.
I want $744 fine because I
And how far back that goes is a really dark story. Reconstruction was an era when 4 million African Americans made it out of bondage and were able to achieve at really high levels, whether it was in business, in education, different ways of prosperity that really threatened white supremacy.
They elected many Black men to positions of power. Of course, that was a sea change from how power had been exercised during slavery, and a lot of white folks just didn't like it. They were nostalgic for the old days of overt white supremacy, and so they subverted Reconstruction.
If you look at misdemeanors and you track them from the Reconstruction era to modern day, you see the fingerprints everywhere of white supremacy and control of Black bodies.
The landowners, they had nearly lost everything. And the only way to get that back is to somehow corral the Black labor force back onto the same plantations that they had once worked.
The
most effective way of forcing African Americans back into this condition that would be so similar to slavery was to begin to criminalize black life itself.
Misdemeanor offenses for incredibly trivial or made-up things, what should have been tiny penalties for non-existent offenses, turn into years of people's lives.
Where were you taken? I was taken out to the camps. Where did you sleep? Slept on some hay. Chain was on me.
I'm being put into handcuffs. I'm being dragged into this cold space. I don't have anything to cover myself. And I'm asked to sit inside of this tiny little room, and I have no idea why I'm there.
Was there any jury that tried you? No, sir. Did the recorder ask you whether you wanted a lawyer? No, sir.
And I thought that I would have time to talk to a court-appointed attorney so we could talk about what happened. I could ask them to get other, pieces of evidence that would prove that, hey, I'm poor. It wasn't like I was trying to run off with this money.
Did they furnish any copy of the charge against you? No, sir, they did not. Did they give you any opportunity to plead to any accusation? They never gave me anything at all.
When they asked me how I pled no contest. I didn't understand that no contest is the same as guilty, and that I would walk away with a misdemeanor that would affect my ability to get hired.
The justice system after emancipation was weaponized against Black people. It perpetuated slavery by making the mechanisms of enslavement pretty much the same. Family separation, backbreaking labor, people having no rights. You could be sold on the steps of the courthouse that you were convicted in and given to the highest bidder.
A whole separate criminal code that applied to African Americans was established.
Many misdemeanor offenses are best understood as mechanisms of social control. They're not designed to catch dangerous or guilty people, but rather they are tools. We give them to police as additional ways of exercising their authority.
Some of these laws were overtly race-based, and with others then and now, the understanding was that the laws would look race-neutral, but they would be applied and enforced almost exclusively against Black people.
For these governments to sell prisoners into slavery, you first have to arrest lots of people. There's a big problem with that, though. There's just not enough crime for this system to work and for it to be profitable. The state governments of the South had to invent new crimes.
Southern legislatures, which are essentially run by Confederates at that time, are trying to reinscribe a form of slavery through a system of laws called Black Codes.
A whole category of new statutes passed in almost every southern state that attached these enormous penalties to what were in reality very minor thefts. Those were laws, and many others like it, that were only ever enforced against African Americans. And so it became a way to have a basis for arresting huge numbers of Black people.
I don't remember much about writing the check.
John Owen was caught taking 6 ears of corn from a cornfield and was arrested under the Black Codes.
This is $4, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 times 4 is $28. So just this pile right here is how much I went to jail for.
Owen was put in jail for months until he was finally tried for theft.
I have a theft charge. It's theft by check. I had money in the bank, but I didn't know how long it took for checks to process. Like, I know better now. I could have donated plasma, gotten $25.
Under his sentence, Owen was leased into convict labor and sent to the chain gang, where he served 2 years for the corn and a 3rd year for the court costs.
I was in the Hays County Jail for a total of 45 days for $25 worth of food.
Michael Brown, who was the teenager who was killed by police in Ferguson, whose death led to the explosion of the Black Lives Matter movement, he was stopped for jaywalking. He stepped off the sidewalk and was walking in the street, and there was a local criminal ordinance that made it a crime to do so. African Americans are being cited for jaywalking at 3, 5, 10 times the rate of white pedestrians.
The legislatures of the white South make it a crime to walk alongside a railroad. In an era in which there are no paved roads, the easiest way for a poor person to get from one place to another is to walk alongside a railroad. That law didn't say this only applies to black people, but those were laws that were only ever enforced against African Americans.
All of us engage in what would be considered to be minor crimes. And for some people, it's crossing the street at the wrong time. But if you're black or brown, then it becomes categorized as something that's criminal.
So what is I doing?
Didn't use a crosswalk.
All I'm trying to do is go home, man. I'm tired. I just got off of work.
Nandi Kane says he was walking home from work when it happened.
I felt like they were gonna draw a gun out and shoot me in my back.
I'm tired of all this shit, man.
Vagrancy laws were passed that essentially meant any black person who was found on the streets unemployed and couldn't show evidence of work was a criminal, a vagrant.
Trespass laws originate from this idea that African Americans only belong in certain spaces and at certain times. And so they give police officers the ability, under the guise of law, to dictate where an African American person can be, what time they can be there, and how they can operate in certain spaces.
My kids' daycare was inside of one of the buildings to the Skyway, so I figured I'd take a walk, find somewhere to sit down, and wait on them to get there.
I'm going to New Horizons to pick up my kids. I was sitting there for 10 minutes.
Monroe Dolphus was standing in the train yard when he was grabbed by the sheriff's deputy. Monroe stated that he had not committed any crime.
Wait. You're gonna go to jail. I'm not doing anything wrong.
Hold on.
Can you please? No, come on, brother.
I'm not your brother.
This is assault.
At this moment, I saw my children's daycare class and their teachers and everything walking past while this was happening. He took the taser and drove it into my leg, and pretty much at that point lost all control of the leg.
The deputy later claimed that the crime committed by Dolphus was taking a 25-cent tin of fish from the lunch pail of a Southern Railway worker. Unable to provide any evidence to support this, the charge was changed to vagrancy.
And I kept asking them what I was being charged with. They'll create false charges just to make sure that everything is perpetuated.
Judge Longshore found Dolphus guilty of misdemeanor vagrancy and sentenced him to 5 months and 20 days of hard labor in the mines of Tennessee, coal, iron, and railroad.
Going back to the vagrancy laws of the late 19th century, the people who make those laws have in mind another group of people for whom there is an inherent threat to their livelihood, like breaking barbecue ordinances in public parks or sleeping in dormitories that white people don't think you live there.
I have every right to call the police.
It allows law enforcement to regulate whether or not certain behavior for one group of people is deemed criminal and another group of people is just frivolous activity.
Many people remember the Starbucks debacle in Philadelphia. There were 2 African-American men at a Starbucks. The employee had them arrested for loitering, where they're clearly not engaging in that behavior.
What did they get called for? Because there were 2 black guys sitting here meeting me? Yes, I did.
Loitering is a police tool of choice. It's the go-to offense that police often use to impose their authority. In the misdemeanor system, there is no conduct too minor, no act too small that the state cannot render a crime.
Black people charged with a misdemeanor are 75% more likely to be locked up than white people. You have to realize that these laws didn't happen by chance. They were part of a system to continue to oppress black bodies.
Our misdemeanor system includes all kinds of offenses, and some of them can be quite serious. Domestic violence, DUI, but most of the time, we treat minor, harmless conduct as misdemeanors. Traffic offenses, jaywalking, order maintenance offenses, spitting, driving on a suspended license for failure to pay a fine. And yet, these minor, meaningless misdemeanors can have terrible consequences for individuals. To understand the misdemeanor system, follow the money.
The accused are paying for the judges, the prosecutors, and the public
They made
defender.
more than $3.5 million off phone commissary at the jail. It's a no money maker.
They call it the $20 ad.
I'm a family member, transfers money in jail.
Pocketing leftover money from the inmates'
about
food budget.
$2,000 a month in easy
They are a
sales.
controversial food vendor with a
Rampant
big
fraud,
state contract.
waste, and
Tonight,
abuse.
Aramark is
The
in
company
spotlight.
that uses inmate workers.
Today's system is estimated at $80 billion. The misdemeanor side of it, it is a way of saddling people with fines and fees that will put money in the pockets of the administrators of that system.
The first time I got a ticket, my insurance had lapsed. So I got the speeding ticket and I got a no insurance ticket at the same time. The next time I got pulled over, I was arrested for driving with a suspended license. I paid the tickets, paid the court costs, paid my fees and fines, but they said for driving with a suspended license, the punishment for that is we're going to suspend your license for 2 years. I would often have to choose between paying my inspection or my registration or paying my light bill or other bills that I had. I had to drive my car to get to work because I had a construction job. If I needed to take material to the job, I couldn't take plywood or 2x4s on a bus.
I felt like there was no way I was gonna be able to take care of the kids on my own while you were out because I didn't know how long you were gonna be in jail.
This officer saw me, a young Hispanic guy, driving a 63 Impala and said, you know what, that guy, he's up to something. I was trying to go to work, trying to pay bills, and he's treating me like a hardened criminal. That misdemeanor charge ended up becoming something that I couldn't get rid of.
They're being treated as revenue sources, charged daily fees for being in jail, supervision fees, tether fees, drug testing fees, database fees to fund bail bondsmen, private probation companies, electronic monitoring companies, drug testing companies. It is disturbingly similar to the way that we saw African Americans being exploited in the post-war South.
I'm DeMario Davis, linebacker for the New Orleans Saints. I was born and raised in Mississippi, pretty much raised by a single mom. Entering into my second year of college, me and a teammate were caught shoplifting groceries from Walmart. It kind of felt a lot more like a drug bust than us having stole some groceries. The bail was set at $10,000 and I didn't have $10,000. The football coaches bailed us out. A misdemeanor, you're supposed to be able to be in front of the judge within 90 days, but this is not happening. This is not happening in our country. We have people who are spending 7, 8 months in jail who have not even been sentenced.
Cop arrested me and I was charged with the misdemeanor.
The term chain gang was coined on account of the shackle worn by convict laborers.
They said, okay, listen, we're gonna let you go home now. But Scram's gonna come and put a monitor on you.
They were taken to an anvil, where a rivet was pounded into the ankle cuffs to keep them closed. Then the cuffs were chained together.
The initial fee to get on the Scram was $250. That's just to have it put on. Then after that, they charged me $220 a month for the actual monitor.
Many of the convicts suffered from shackle sores, ulcers where the iron ground against their skin. Gangrene and other infections were also common.
Right after they put it on me, you start causing these really severe sores and rashes. And their attitude pretty much is, it's court ordered, it's by a judge, and you'll wear it, or you can go back to jail.
The emaciated convict laborers worked their entire days barefoot, but the shackles were always on their ankles. They mined in them, slept in them, and those who died of disease or beatings were buried in them.
What they're doing is unjust. What they're doing is profiteering, because you're paying them. You're their slave with their shackle on your foot.
I remember this hopeless feeling just overcome me. I couldn't take care of my family.
The biggest misconception about misdemeanors is that they are minor. The full consequences of getting a misdemeanor can be astronomical.
It hurt me for 10 years, and it completely disrupted my life. And I have been trying to figure out how to get my life back on track. This will be a part of my story for the rest of my life.
When people are booked into jails for a week or a year or even a day, you just cannot avoid the trauma that's inflicted upon you. The moment you hit the jail, you don't come out of that unchanged or untouched. You witness trauma, you witness violence, and it changes you. It changes your community.
I tried to get a job at Amazon where my roommate worked. I called to Walmart and I called to several other retail stores. I got turned away because I had a misdemeanor charge for theft.
Not enough people talk about what it means to have a misdemeanor on your record. It can determine the kind of job that you get, to the kind of housing that you can qualify for, to the kind of schools that you can go to. A lot of people are harmed for life because of the smallest infractions.
They're being rendered homeless. They're going without food, without medication. Their children are suffering.
Due to misdemeanors, I lost my housing. Shortly after that, I lost my vehicle, which led to me losing my job. And it was just one thing after another, like kicks to the face. I had full custody of my children. They had to get to school. We had to sleep in the car, waking up at like 4 in the morning, getting to a laundromat to make sure that they have clean school uniforms.
I had worked so hard, and all of that was ruined by one charge. One misdemeanor ruined my ability to get even just basic work.
They can't get a job if they have to check a box that says they've been convicted of a crime. They can't even rent housing because they got poor credit when they received a ridiculous $500 speeding violation. So this system was designed both to extract from people, but also to marginalize their presence in society.
It's finna be a mass grave site.
This is a dormitory. We stupid crowded. These are the beds. They right beside each other. And this is the space.
Everybody just dying and getting sick and shit. Like, this shit serious as fuck. Bro, you alright? You want me to go get the police?
No.
What have you done this bitch?
You ain't gonna do nothing about it.
This motherfucker literally in this bitch dying, bro. I don't know what to do.
One of the worst places to be during this pandemic is locked up in jail.
The judge never said, I'm sending you to prison to die.
The same horror story is emerging of the unchecked spread of infection and inmates essentially being left to die.
Now, jaywalking or theft of a small amount or any sort of vagrancy type of behavior can lead to your incarceration and eventual contracting of the virus and death.
I've been in jail for 2.5 months for petty theft, a nonviolent crime that carries a misdemeanor charge for the price value of less than $100. There's been 3 deaths. 2 being inmates, 1 being a guard. As far as like people who are working for the facility, they're like intertwined. They could easily be catching it. That's how one of the guards caught it. My life is in danger.
These human beings aren't valued enough for us to apply the same kinds of safety measures there that we are in other sectors of society. If it wasn't already bad enough that you are booked into jail because you didn't have the money to pay the ticket and your license is suspended, that is now life-threatening to you.
Sheriff's Office is now releasing non-violent inmates as a next step in mitigating the spread of COVID-19.
Hundreds of inmates have been released from Shelby County's jail in an effort to put fewer people at risk for coronavirus.
600 inmates. A total of 38 inmates are ordered to release.
They were inmates. Now they're freed people.
Because of COVID-19, thousands of misdemeanor defendants are rightly being released. It's clear that these individuals should have never been incarcerated in the first place. We can tell by the fact that after these releases, we haven't seen any sort of crime wave. There's a different type of crime wave that should concern us, though, and that's the crime of violence against Black people post-Civil War.
State violence has historically been used to intimidate people of color, especially Black people. We see this all throughout history.
Misdemeanors, they have almost nothing to do with public safety. What misdemeanors do is give police an extraordinary amount of discretion with any minor offense premised on the idea that the Black man is a threat.
Misdemeanors are a very specific mechanism that legalize violence toward Black people and keep them in a very particular place, not just as individuals, but as an entire community of people.
When we look at so many cases in history, often what started as an investigation or a claim of a petty misdemeanor offense led to police officer-supported and sanctioned racial terrorism.
All too often, we see police exercising that terrible authority of violence against people who have only been suspected of the most minor of crime.
The problem isn't bad apple cops. The problem is the system is working the way it's supposed to.
Police shot this boy outside my apartment. They killed him.
Don't move! Don't move! Let's get it, please. Let's get it, please. Hey, bro! You move, I swear to God! Hey, boss!
I just did pretty. That's all. I'm so sorry. I have no gun.
Gray appeared to be unable to walk and was screaming as he was carried, feet dragging on the ground, to a police van.
I know, you just on your job.
mama. They gonna kill me, man. I can't breathe. Please, I can't breathe, officer. Please.
My life could have so easily been taken in that Skyway. George Floyd goes to show further that the most minor of offenses, even no offense at all, could result in death.
The very purpose of racial terrorism is control, is social control.
What we have seen in the killings of those accused was that misdemeanors became the gateway for police violence and murder.
We are seeing decriminalization. We are seeing citations instead of arrests. We are seeing people let out of jail. We are seeing pushback against fines and fees. But at the same time, there is so much more work that needs to be done.
Who defined what a misdemeanor is? The whole thing was built on exploitation, on racial violence, on building up industrial capitalism.
We should not be locking up people who speed, who are too poor to pay a fine or a fee, who loiter or trespass or jaywalk. They're not dangerous, they're not scary.
There's never been a good reason to lock up anybody for petty offenses. Like slavery back in the day, the law itself is doing the work of oppression. The criminal law is providing the authority to arrest Black people, to punish Black people, to kill Black people. And ultimately, the real crime is that we're Black.
When officers use their discretion and still choose to arrest low-level offenders instead of citing and releasing them, they are choosing to lock a human into a cage we wouldn't even put our dogs in.
We got 123 people out of the Hayes County Jail yesterday.
It eliminated the penalty for being caught driving with a suspended license from another 2-year suspension to a 90-day suspension.
Don't allow the outside world to corrupt you. Don't allow the outside world to tell you who you are.
I wanted to be a voice for those who are not able to be a voice for themselves.
Thanks, folks. I want to pause for a second. Invite you to take a breath, to hold what you've witnessed and heard, testimony and imagery that is challenging, not surprising, and yet hard to hold, and to imagine what comes next, always in this work that's been going for a long time and has so much further to go. When Gus and I talked about this forum, he was struck, I think, that Sunday by Peter Mayer, who was here, on one of his songs about this old idea of how we create circles of inclusion. And there's another poem by Rilke who talks about living our lives in ever-expanding circles. And thinking about, I think, when we were talking about this, what came to my mind was the expanding circles of both how we create inclusive community in church life, of course, in theology and spirituality, but in systems and social structures, and how intertwined all those circles are. That makes it both complicated, but also, as one activist talked about recently, even if you pull on one small thread of it, it's connected to everything else. So you're helping untangle the whole thing, even if it feels like a tiny bit. So I'm going to play a little bit of this song from Pete for you. And I invite you during that to reflect on how we are creating those circles of inclusion in the most just and equitable ways, in attention to our first source as Unitarian Universalists, which is direct experience, people's stories. Some theologians call them people's stories, and telling their stories is like ancient scripture, but a living one. So we'll pause there. I want you to think about what you're holding. I'll share this, and then we'll have time for comments and reflections as well.
Jesus spoke, entreating them to live together in a great circle of love. When his followers asked him then who should be included, Jesus said, let everybody in, everybody in, everybody in, to the circle, circle. Everybody, 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 to the circle, circle. Oligarchs, tyrants try to keep some in, everyone else outside. Revolution sweeps across the land, and the people all stand. The common folk cry, let everybody in, everybody in, everybody in, to the circle, circle. Everybody, 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 to the circle, circle. Sometimes a circle is a class or creed. Sometimes a circle is made of only men. Until Susan B. Anthony says, what about me? Let me in, let everybody in, everybody in, everybody in, to the circle, circle. Everybody, 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 to the circle, circle. Sometimes a circle is a privileged thing, excluding people for the color of their skin. Till the voice learn to broken, open up that door. The more we are, the greater we become. After all, we all are one. Bringing the people, but don't stop there. Bringing the fish in the sea, birds in the air. Bringing the rivers wide, mountains tall. We go together, but not at all. Let everybody in, everybody into the circle, circle. Everybody, 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 everybody into the circle, circle. Everybody, 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 circle, circle. Everybody, 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 everybody into the circle, circle.
After seeing that film, I'm just, my heart is filled with grief and also hope for people to realize how we all really need to support each other no matter what. Wanted to open it up to all of you on recording too, to see if you have any comments or reflections, what struck you about the film, anything. George is waiting with you.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
Well, Terry and I are sitting here watching this. And I had an invitation tonight to go to another church and talk about what it's like to be Black in this community. But I chose to stick with the church tonight, and I'm very glad I did. I was around 100 miles from where Emmett Till was killed. I was a year younger than he was at the time. My brother lives about 3 miles from where Eric Gardner, Brown, I guess his name was, in Ferguson was killed. We know that the cycle continues, and it's going to take folks like you folks sitting in the audience to say, we've got to stop this. It's not going to be about Black people saying, well, we've done enough, we've had enough, we've heard enough, and we're going to do something to stop it. It's a system and a structure that needs to be worked on. And the more you know about the truth, the better it is for all of us. We really do need each other, and all of us. And I just applaud you for coming and participating and thinking about what you can do to make lives safer for my kids, grandkids, your kids, grandkids as well. We need to learn how to live together in this world. I had to say that because otherwise I wouldn't say much.
Thank you, George.
Thanks. And those in the room, even though I didn't model it very well, so the microphone's up here, so if you want to speak up, if you have something to say, or get closer so that folks online can hear it as well.
Where's the microphone?
Right here.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm Fletcher Hines, and it's very difficult to watch. Hardly any words to really explain my reaction to it, other than I've always felt that the legal system was used for social control and to subjugate brown and Black people. But you know, I'm just really upset about it, and I just want to know what can be done. And you know, I'm willing to get involved in some way to address this, and I'm looking for suggestions. Thank you.
This is Jerry Katzman. Fletcher, you know, it is hard to watch, and as Elizabeth and I are watching it, we're thinking, how hard is it to watch if you're a person of color? and have a child and grandchildren that are at risk. You know, we all knew about Jim Crow and these misdemeanor laws to get people to work, in essence, as free convict labor. But to realize that those same sorts of misdemeanor laws are what entrap people today still. And it's just hard to imagine that the system is so racially biased. I say it's hard to imagine, but we all understand it's true. And it's hard to know what to do because the system from bottom to top has that same racial bias. Police, prosecutors, judges, parole officers, there are good people, certainly amongst all those groups, but the system from bottom to top just inherently has that racial bias, and it's hard to know. I just have no idea how to fight that.
Go ahead, Patty.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, what does anyone know of any legislation that is in the Minnesota House or Senate to change things that would make improve this situation?
Yeah, this is Fletcher Hines again. The only thing that it seems like, I don't know if the legislature is going to get much anything done, but I haven't heard anything about addressing the racial bias or the systematic injustice of our criminal justice system. It seems like it's happening at the city level. I know the city of Minneapolis took some action against no-knock warrants and police pulling over people for minor traffic offenses, trying to, I don't know exactly, I haven't read the law, but it sounds like they're saying that police shouldn't be pulling people over for expired tabs and something hanging from the rearview mirror, things like that. So it seems like, I know at the city of Minneapolis, they found that they, after several years of investigation, that there was evidence of racial bias in the execution of the enforcement of the law. So I don't know what's happening in Rochester. I just moved here, but it seems like cities are trying to address it by looking at the practices of the police force. But I agree that all the way from and I worked in human services for a number of years and had contact with probation officers. And again, I think you're right. They're all really good people, but boy, the system is just really against justice in a true sense of the word. So it seems like, again, to summarize it, that it's on this kind of a city by city investigative efforts to try and correct it. I don't know of anything at the legislative level. It seems like people are talking about more law enforcement rather than less, and it just seems like a lot of the law enforcement has nothing to do with public safety. Like they say, it's about social control, and it's really a shame. And I think that people are trying to make some efforts to address it, but it's an uphill battle. But I'm willing to climb the hill with other people.
It's amazing to me how misdemeanors are charged and people cannot afford the money to get out. And to hear about all these other fees that they're charged that comes to hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and you're talking about people who are more vulnerable and oftentimes low income and not able to pay that fine, and so it blossoms into more prison time. Sometimes a misdemeanor blossoms into a felony, and then they are convicted for a longer period of time to stay in prison. And when you hear about things like private prisons that are really built from the profiteering of the unjust legal system. You know, there was one that was, I think they were trying to build one in Pine Island once, and you know, people went out and protested in a big way, and they talked to their city council, and it never got built because there was such public resistance to it. So those are the kinds of things we have to do. Talking to our legislators and to address it. You know, this has been a long time thing. This is nothing new. The system is so large, and the corporations are so large that profit from this, that they provide structures so that they don't have to take account to what's happening to the people.
You know, Gus, what you're saying really resonates. I think if there was one thing that, I mean, the whole thing bothered me, and I watched the video, and I think to myself, you know, Elizabeth, my daughter, is always talking about just stopping. She's very serious about the whole idea of defunding the police. And I'm sort of like in this place, well, I can't see that. But one of the things that I'm thinking about, and it really bothers me, and I guess I'm trying to think about what is something that you might be able to take a bite into, or might be able to do something about. And your comment about the whole profiteering thing, about jails and about that whole sense of inmates having to pay, or people having to pay their fines or having to pay their costs, that really strikes me as being completely inappropriate. And I'm wondering if that might be a place that we could start, or it'd be interesting to see if there's legislation that we could advocate for, talk to Bolden or some of the other folks who represent us in the legislature about introducing legislation to eliminate that in the state, or maybe in our city council. If we have, I'm sure we have those fees in Rochester, and you know, talk to our city council about eliminating those, because they just are inherently unfair. They harken back to the whole idea of debtors' prisons, you know, back in the time of Dickens and things like that. And that feels to me like something that might be something we could take a bite out of, or at least look at. You know, because I'm looking for something to grab a hold of and try to work with. And you know, like you said, Jerry, the system is so huge that you can't. But maybe one little piece of it.
Take your calendar talk.
Yes, you're welcome.
Hi, I have three things that I want to share. And the first is that on Monday night, the City Council is going to consider municipal ID. And that's an important piece of misdemeanor. I saw a number of migrants when I worked for Migrant Head Start who came up without proper insurance on their cars, and then they'd get stopped and a misdemeanor, and the same thing would happen to them that we saw, you know, over time, and their fines kept increasing and they couldn't afford to pay for insurance in the first place. So that's one thing that you could do, is show up on Monday night when the council is going to discuss and I believe take a vote on it. The Post Bulletin came out with a terrible position on it that basically discounted, and their favorite quote is, of course, we have to be concerned about the illegals who this is going to benefit. That's one thing. In 2019, the first time Rochester ever hosted the Minnesota Nonprofit Conference, a gentleman from Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and I'm sorry, I can't recall his name or the organization that he put together, but he was given the award for his service and his creativity and what he accomplished, and that was he set up a program whereby if somebody got stopped for a taillight, this is after the fact, of course, they could have already been murdered by that point, but if in fact they were issued a misdemeanor because of a taillight out or something wrong with their car, their muffler or whatever, they would be given a voucher to have that repaired. And when he spoke that day, Rochester was well represented there, and it was my understanding that the police department locally was going to pursue that and institute the same program in Rochester. I'm not sure if that has been followed up or happened? And the other thing about the ankle monitors, we saw hundreds of young people released directly from Border Patrol, 450 a day sometimes, all for the first time in our fourth trip, issued ankle monitors that I don't know how they can maintain them, what's going to happen about that. And then two, you know, several people from our church have been working with the Nicaraguan family here, and we have worked very hard the last 2 months or so, because the woman's brother is in an ICE detention center, a for-profit center, one of the worst in Texas, and he was supposed to appear for court, and his dates were changed and they were put ahead, and he just found out yesterday that they rejected his chance to stay in the United States. And so I just think the for-profit prison system and ICE for-profit, that just has to go.
Definitely, because again, if you have for-profit, you're going to have more and more people be picked up because they have to fill the prisons and they get worse. And yes, here we do have the jail, and also not only the people inside, but the relatives outside. They have to purchase a phone card so that they can call you, or you can call them, and you have to pay for soap, you have to pay, for canteen products, toothpaste, and other things like that.
A little bit, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, and I'm just saying, it all does mount up, and then as I said too, when you have this, a record, it's real hard then for housing, get a job. People have addictions too, but it is very scary. I have a son-in-law, and I was very scared when he was in Rochester, but again, just walking in our neighborhood or whatever, we did that anyway.
One thing that comes to mind in this work is, remember, I'm blanking on his name now. He works for the has worked for the Sierra Club here in Rochester. What? No. Yeah, it's Rick Morris. Rick Morris led a forum here sometime during the last 2 years. I just remember it was on Zoom, but I don't remember exactly when. And people were asking similar things about climate catastrophe and the overwhelmingness of it, right? And what can you possibly do? And I just remember Rick commiserating with that and acknowledging, yes, with all of these huge social issues, a sense of overwhelm and inability to make any significant impact. And he said, well, the thing that comes to mind is, rather than trying to change every single light bulb in the world to energy efficient and transforming every house to geothermal, all of which would benefit and be good, commit to showing up to a certain amount of local municipality meetings, like Sandy was saying. Show up to city council, show up to the school board. Sometimes the way to affect something that makes a clear impact is to focus so locally while you're keeping that global mindset of the larger system. And things that come to mind are, yes, municipal IDs that Sandy mentioned, school resource officer conversation in the public school district. As we know, our school board is receptive often to loud public comment and opinion, and receptive to shifts and changes by people who show up regularly, right? So showing up there, because that's a small part of the larger system of policing and interactions with youth, and youth of color in the public school system, of what their interactions with law enforcement are. And then it's also that transformation. I think finding that transformation of heart to pay attention to these stories, and sometimes sitting with the discomfort. I heard a little bit of that invitation in this, of sometimes systems of liberal white supremacy and perfectionism lead us quickly to feeling like, how do we fix it? And we can. And the desire to want to fix it is not a bad thing. But the assumption that we can, and let's just do these things and it's going to be done, of course we know that's not the case. So trying to find that spiritual practice of being in the mire a little bit, the muck of it, and feeling it and letting it transform you, and do action too. But all of that, at once, is some of the hardest things I see in activism and social work. But that old phrase, think globally, act locally, I think is where I see such lasting and impactful change, because it's rooted in relationship and community, and that tends to be what sustains it.
You spoke about that in one of your sermons a couple weeks ago about what the term you used, or I think you used the term sort of an arrogance there, thinking that we're going to be able to solve it all right now. I think you're right. I think we need to be aware that we can't, but that doesn't mean we have to.
Yeah. Sounds like something I'd say.
Yeah, it does sound like something.
We're a little over our time, which is fine, but want to open it up to other comments. And
Sandy, would you just mention that city council meeting on Monday again, please? What time is it?
I was looking for my email from Phil, and I can't find it, but it's Monday. My recollection is 7, but I'll search again and see if I can get it.
Well, there's one thing right now, all of us here can attend that Monday meeting. That would be pretty powerful and helpful.
I might just mention that the police chief here in Rochester is actually very responsive, and he is working with people in the community, and he's approachable. And I know that they're very proud of some of the things that they're doing in terms of stopping people with brake lights and giving them, he told me once that they were giving them something to get them fixed. So it's not, he's being proactive, and he is approachable, and I think that's part of the battle, is getting people that really understand and are willing to listen and talk to folks in the marginalized communities. And I know they're working with a group called CERT's Community Emergency Response Team, with a gentleman named Andre Crockett and also a gentleman named Bud Whitehorn. So I know that they're listening and working with people. I attended a funeral last Saturday, Terry and I, with Stephanie Whitehorn. Bud's wife's mother passed away, and I saw policemen as part of the group. Bud was a reformed gang member who is now working, turned his life around and is working and talking with folks. So I know there are good things that are going on in the community as well. So that gives me some hope, but it's difficult out there. It really is. And I'm kind of glad though that you were able to show through your film. You showed what happened years ago and showed what is happening now, because it is still happening now in some areas, and people need to know and understand that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we just have to work to, not fight these voter suppression laws too, so that we get a broader, person, and also working to restore the vote for people who have, served their time in prison and they're out, and they should be able to have a say in our democracy if we still have one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, Sandy.
So the council meeting is at 7 p.m. May 2nd. Monday.
Thanks. Thank you. Gus, any final comments or? Sure, I'll close here quick. So again, breath of gratitude. The only way change is made is through community and transformation of heart and people together and hearts together. And those intersecting circles of inclusion and justice and equity and hope. May we find our place there. One invitation, if you follow our national association, the UUA, their new common read for the coming year is Defund Fear, a book about different systems of public safety and policing, and we'll be having some groups in fall on that, some discussions and forums as well. And I think I'll just end with this kind of brief reflection that I likewise I grew up with my father working for the city, so I knew police officers by first name in our community. Pretty much the whole department were either family, friends, or acquaintances for decades. We grew up, doing ride-alongs in their car, which was really quiet in lower North Mankato. And at the same time, I think we have to drastically reimagine what public safety looks like in a country that's rooted in slave patrols and all of that we saw tonight and are reminded of regularly. So understanding the difference between good individuals within it and evil and oppressive systems, and separating those out so we don't dehumanize others in the process of trying to build up our common humanity. And finding that balance is important in these public conversations. So thank you, Gus, for bringing this film to our attention and presenting. Thanks to those joining tonight in person and online. The work continues, and we do so in community. So be well, take good care. I'll let you wave goodbye to the in-house folks here as well. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.